All right, folks, it is 12:30, time to start class, okay? There's likely going to be a few people coming in a little late. It's about the planer and joiner, stuff like that. In theory, we don't need a joiner. Table saw for the edges. Not necessarily the case. You need a flat, straight, square edge to put against the fence on the table saw. That's one of the main reasons we use the joiner. Well, I got somebody coming in. Okay. And it does some other things too that are pretty handy to have around. Hold on. Okay, so let's talk about tomorrow a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go to screen share here and go to our page. All right. So you guys need to understand that tomorrow is going to be a dry run, a test day for when the sub is here next week. Okay. And so far I have it set up for the sub to use Big Blue Button. Okay. Now, I'm actually going to meet with him tomorrow and go over this, and I'm going to let him pick between using Big Blue Button and discussions. But my guess is he'll just use the conferences, the Big Blue Button. Okay, so tomorrow's just a kind of a test run. Each class is going to log in. Instead of logging in and coming into Zoom, okay, you're going to go straight to conferences. And here, when this is activated, when the start is hit, that's when you guys will start to be let into class, okay? And there'll be a new one of these. There'll be a conference set up for each day next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, okay? So that should work. I'll be available the first half of the week via email. So if you do need to get a hold of me for some reason, you can. But always ask the sub a question if you have a question about something that's going on or anything like that. So tomorrow we're going to use conferences instead of Zoom. And there is an announcement here that relates to that. Tuesday, November 24th, that's tomorrow. You'll need to log into the Big Blue Button for class, okay? So use the conferences link on the left of the page to log into the class tomorrow. All right, was somebody else trying to get in? Nope. All right, so, okay, I'll take a look at that here in a second. Okay, so be sure and do that, all right? Also, in the modules page, we've got a little thing here of what's going on for the week. We're gonna go over the planer and the drum sander, and if we have time, we'll do a little bit of the table saw. But on Wednesday, there'll be a little quiz that you guys will take. And it's going to relate to the planer, drum sander, and table saw, okay? Now, I will post both of these sheets on tomorrow's page and on Wednesday's page. If you have any, it's just going to be another little 5-question quiz like usual. It's nothing huge. But if you have any questions about anything on the quiz, you can refer to this major tool identification sheet. And so, for example, if it's a question about the table saw and you're not sure of the answer, all you have to do is scroll down here to the table saw and look for the answer in here. Okay. Usually it's something that's in bold like this. Like no stock less than 12 inches long is allowed to be cut on the table saw. So most of the questions should be basically referring to these bold portions in here, okay? So that's where you get, and I gotta get rid of that, get to that, okay? When we go back for Tuesday is going to be playing with the Big Blue Button, make sure it works right. And we'll probably go over the table saw some more during that portion while we're using that, see how it works, okay? And then we go back and take a look at Wednesday. And Wednesday we will review anything that's gonna be on the quiz. If there's anything on it from the planer or the drum sander, Justin Blake, we'll review it. And we'll review anything else that might be on the quiz for the table saw, okay? So that's how that's gonna work, all right? So I'm gonna stop this share and we're gonna get started. I will show you why it's called the drum sander. We're gonna start with the planer, okay? So this is our planer, all right? We've had this for about 2 years now. The drum sander and the planer came to us at about the same time, all right? And this is a digital planer. In other words, the bed raises and lowers. In other words, the depth of cut is controlled by the motor on the bed. We set it digitally, and I'll show you all about that. Okay, so let's take a look. Actually, see, you need a flat face to put down in the planer is the main reason we use the joiner. And actually what you guys would end up using the joiner form or anything is flattening, straightening, and squaring the edge of a board, okay, prior to going to the table saw. All right, so let's first take a look at, I'm trying to move this thing over, the parts of a planer on the guts on the inside. Okay, there's three main components on the inside here. Okay, and let's see if we can get it where you guys can kind of see it. I hope you should be able to see there are three main shafts in here. There's this one right here, driven by this gear, this one back here driven by this gear, and the center one driven by the belts. Okay, so basically this front shaft, this is an automatic feed machine. In other words, when you get a board into here, this front pinch roller or feed roller that's right inside here is going to grab your board and feed it into the cutter head at a consistent rate. In other words, you don't have to push it through the cutter head, the machine does it. The one at the back here is another feed roller that's going to bring the board out from the cutter head and eject it out of the machine when it's done. And then the center one here is the cutter head itself. You should be able to see all these individual little squares on here. Those are the individual knives. This is a spiral or helical cutter head, just like our joiner is. This one has 154 separate solid carbide cutters in it that can be rotated 90 degrees for a new sharp edge. Very nice. It takes a long time to rotate 154 knives, but it's very handy to have. So that's the inside of the planer, okay? So let's take a look at how this thing works. Oh, let me point one other thing out. This rotates in such a way, this cutter head does, so that, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, it rotates in this direction. In other words, if something were to happen and this front feed roller failed and let go of the board, it's rotating a way that would shoot the board out the back of the machine where you would be standing if you're not standing to the right of the machine. So you never stand, in a machine, you never stand behind the board where you get kicked out right at you. Really bad idea. All right, so let's talk about how this thing actually works. All right. Okay, so as I said before, this is a digital machine. All right, so let's start with our board. Okay, so I have a board here that has been through the joiner. In other words, I have one flat face that I can now put down in the planer, okay? I've pencil marked every single face, both faces. This one was already taken off on the joiner. The edges, right? And the ends. This has got paint on it, so I didn't have to mark it. And this end's been marked. In other words, every one of these surfaces that have pencil marks on it has to be treated, okay, before you can use it in furniture. So when I put pencil marks on it, that's really easy for me to understand where I may have left off a previous day to know what I have left to do, okay? So I have this surface here that's clean, no pencil marks because it's been through the joiner. That's what's going to go down in the planer, okay? On the joiner, the cutter head is below the board. On the planer, the cutter head is above the board, okay? So this will be the next surface we deal with. Since this is a digital planer, in other words, all the controls for raising and lowering the bed are right here, that doesn't mean there's not a manual way to do it too. There's a hand crank down here. You can manually raise and lower the bed, but we use this digital. What that means is you have to start by accurately measuring the current thickness of your board in several places. Okay, this board right now, the way it sits, could very easily be thicker in one area or thinner in one area. Okay, so we always have sitting here on the drum sander, or I'm sorry, on the planer, a set of digital calipers. Okay, and if you've never used these before, there's a little wheel right here that you slide it in and out. Okay, so you turn it on and close it all the way, and it should read zeros all the way across. If it doesn't, there's a little zero button right here, zeros it out. This reads up to 4 decimal places, okay? So up to a 10,000th of an inch. So we're gonna open it up, and we're gonna measure the thickness at several different spots. 728 738, 735, 739. Okay, so I'm going to just call it 740. I'm going to round up. Okay, so it's just under 3/4 of an inch thick. So we're at 0.740, 740 thousandths of an inch. Okay, just under 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so on this machine, a couple things. Number one, if your board is shorter than 14 inches long, you can't feed it into the planer. Your board's got to be at least 14 inches long. We can't take a 10, 11, 12 inch long board, feed it through the planer. Okay. Next, I just lost where I was going. You can't do anything with this keypad unless there's a little button down here. I don't know if you guys can see it in the camera. Yes, you can. Okay. You got to rotate it to the right and pop it out. That's the stop button. So when you shut this machine down, that's how it's shut down, is that button. And it locks in that position. You have to pop it out. Okay. You can raise and lower the table here or down on the hand wheel. Okay. But I don't want to do that. All right. So we're at 740. The maximum amount of material you can take off the face of a board in any one pass is 0.125 inches. So 125 thousandths of an inch. That transmits to 1/8 of an inch. That's the decimal equivalent of 1/8 of an inch. Okay. So if we're sitting at 760 and I can take off 0.125, I tend, when I come up to here, that's the max we can take off. We can take off less than that. I tend to just take off 100, 0.100. The math is a lot easier. So I know that I could actually set this from, this was 740. I could actually set this to 640. That's 100 thousandths less than 740 and be okay. So I'm going to set this to 640, and this is how it works. And don't think that you're not going to forget how this works. It's going to take you half a dozen times of setting up this machine before you get it down to where you're comfortable. Okay. So there's a little button here that says program. I have to enter the decimal point, 0.640. This is like an enter key on a keyboard. Okay. Press enter, and then the start button will start flashing. Okay. It's going to motor. It may go back and forth a few times to get to it. It got there pretty quick that time. I'm going to turn dust collection on because this produces a lot of shavings, so it's going to get a little bit noisy. This is my main motor button right here. There's our board. Okay, let me shut that dust collection off. And shut the planer off. Okay, hold on, I got a couple people coming in. Zane and Vince. All right, so that's the basic way we run our planer. Now, there are some other things about the planer you should know. Okay, first of all, before I leave the planer and go to the drum sander, what we generally use the planer for here is to get a board close to final thickness. We don't want to take it all the way down to final thickness. We want to take it about 50 thousandths over where we want to be. So if I'm currently at 640, I would set this machine, I would set it up. So basically, if this was the number I ended on, I'd want to be about 0.590 final thickness. But what I'm going to do before we go anywhere, I'm going to write that measurement that we stopped at on the face of the board that we planed. Okay, and I'll show you why when we get to the drum sander. So there's a couple things. Okay, number one, when you feed your board through the planer, if you're going to make multiple passes in the planer, alternate or vary where it enters the machine. I'd like to keep these knives in here equally dull, I guess you'd say. In other words, I don't want to keep feeding my board through the same spot all the time. It's going to dull these knives faster than it dulls any of the other knives. So you're going to vary where you feed the board into the machine. Another thing you want to keep in mind, even though the maximum depth of cut in this is 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch, there are going to be situations where you do not want to take that much off. Okay, for example, this is actually a piece of poplar. It's only about, well, a little over 4 inches wide, right at 4 inches wide, okay? Poplar's fairly soft. If I have a really skinny little board that's only a couple inches wide and it's pine and really soft wood, I could probably take more than 1/8 of an inch off in a pass. You know, it's not putting much stress on the machine. If I have a wide piece of material, say made out of maple, and it's hard stuff, okay, I'm not going to be able to take 1/8 of an inch off in a single pass. It's going to stress the machine too much. It's going to bog it down. So you have to know a little bit about the property of the material, the properties of the material you're planing, and how that corresponds to how well this machine can handle. I can't take a really wide, really hard board and take 1/8 of an inch off the face in a single pass. It's just not going to happen, okay? But I can take a smaller board out of softer material and probably take a little more than 1/8 of an inch off in a pass. But at some point, if you tried to take 1/4 of an inch off this board in a single pass, the machine won't even allow it. Okay, there's a stop setup right here that I'm not exactly sure when it maxes out. Okay, but there's a piece underneath here that's not going to allow the board to get fed into this pinch roller, this feed roller, if you're trying to take way too much off on a pass. Okay, so it's not going to let you do it. So that's the basics of the planer. I'm not going to go into too much more on it because it's a matter of you needing to be here and physically stand here and enter the dimensions in the pad that you want to do, or the depth of cut that you want to make, and doing it a few times, getting used to it, and listening to the machine. Just like any other machine in here, we always listen to it and hear what it's saying, telling us. One other thing, sometimes you'll be sitting here trying to enter something and you'll hit the wrong key, and it'll say error across here, or ERR, or the word error. If that happens, there's a disconnect switch back here. Basically, it's a giant red handle on and off switch, cuts the power of the machine. All you gotta do is shut it down, leave it off for 3 to 5 seconds, turn it back on, that'll clear that error message and you can start again, okay? So we're gonna go over the drum sander now and take a look at that, all right? So I'm gonna spin this around. Try to get here without tripping over a cord. All right, so this is our drum sander right here. Okay, move it up a little bit and we will zoom in a little bit. And I want to go that way. All right, so this is our drum sander, okay? Basically what it is, well, this is a dual head drum sander, okay? There's a sanding belt at the front where the board first enters in the machine. The sandpaper in this is 100 grit. It's a lot coarser than this. This is 180 grit that's on the belt as the board exits the machine, okay? In order for this machine to run, okay, right now there's no tension on these belts. In order for this machine to run, the first thing you have to do, let me bring this over so you can see it, if we can, raise it up. There it is. Wait, where is it? Oh, it's hidden by that pipe. Let's move it this way. There, now we can see it, okay? Go this way, go up a hair, and zoom in. And go back the other way. Okay, this is an air line that's off the back corner of the machine. Okay, it's compressed air line. These heads are kept in tension with compressed air. So before you can run this machine, there's a lever on the air line right here. You have to turn the air on. When it's off, it's perpendicular to the airline itself.
But did you used to get in a lot of fights back in the day?
Oh yeah.
In line,
You used to win them to a host.
Grandma?
so here it goes through the machine.
Did you used to get into a lot of fights back in the day?
Not a lot.
What's going on?
Some though.
Hey, you got a question? Who's speaking? Do you have a question? So with the air on, and I want to go that way. Okay, so now you can see that the belts are tension. Okay, we've got tension on the belts. All right, we can release tension on the belts in order to change the belt or shift them over a little bit. Right here, right here. It also uses air to keep the belt tracking properly, to keep it centered on the rollers. Okay, these things will shimmy back and forth in order to keep it running. There's limit switches at both ends, this little guy and this little guy. Same thing is there at the other end. So as the belt starts to come off the rollers, it should hit that limit switch and shut it off. Doesn't really work too well for some weird reason. Don't understand why. Okay, we're going to close this up and get the camera over here. So this is the same manufacturer as the planer, and I've never understood why they did it this way. It's annoying, but it's got a very similar. Here, let me rotate this a little bit. I can. That's what I want. Okay. All right. So it's got a real similar looking setup. You can see here there is a touchpad or digital pad, just like the other one. Okay. So, and I want to go that way. The only funky thing about it is on the planer, you have to enter the decimal place to set the depth of cut on this. On this one, you don't. There is no decimal on the keypad. All right. So here's what we do. Here's the basic parts of this thing. Okay. This is the same style of on-off switch or off switch that the planer has. You have to twist it, let it pop out before this will do anything. You can't do anything here unless the air's on and this is popped out. Okay. This here is an ammeter. It tells us the draw or the current draw on the machine as you're feeding a board through it. We need to pay very careful attention to that. It gives you a range here that's considered safe. Anything at 30 amps or under is safe for this machine. Anything between 30 and 60 amps can cause some damage. Anything at 65 amps or over will damage the machine. So this is one of the ways we learn how much we can take off on a single pass by keeping an eye on this meter. Okay. Now that's going to increase the load on the machine the wider the board is. Okay. Put a little skinny board in here, it's not going to draw hardly anything. Put a wide board in here, 36 inches wide, it's going to draw this like crazy. So you can't take as much of the pass, you can't remove as much material in a single pass with a wide board as you can a skinny board. Okay. So this is the reason that I wrote the number or the depth of cut that we had on the last pass on the planer, 0.640. Okay, what I always want to do here is I really don't want those sanding belts to ever touch the surface of this board on the first pass. So I'm going to set it to 10 thousandths over, because 10 thousandths of an inch or 0.010 is the maximum amount we can take off this surface in any one pass. So I'm going to give ourselves a little safety net here. I'm going to set it to 650, 10 thousandths of an inch over what we cut at the planer. So as I said, there's no decimal point here. So I'm going to set it to 650, and this is the button that's going to make that bed move. Okay, this starts the sanding belts. This starts the feed belt. This is an auto feed machine, just like the planer is. You have to wait until this light turns green. It takes a second for it to hold on. Depth selection needs to be on. Okay. So we've got our depth of cut, our heads are going. There's our seat belt. There's no draw, and I can hear that that belt is not making contact with the board right now. That's what I want. I do not want to make contact with the surface of the board on the first pass. Let me back this camera up a little bit. Okay. So now I'm going to set it 10 thousandths of an inch lower. Go to 640. They have to jog up and down a couple times a day. But I'm going to listen to the machine. You'll be able to hear when it makes contact with the surface. And you might see a little bit of a change in this. It's a pretty small board. Okay? Another thing. I sent this board through the first time in that direction. With every pass, turn it around and send the opposite end in first. So when I come to the back of the machine, I've got my board like this. I'm going to turn it like this. We're not going to do the jointed surface. We're only going to do the plain surface. Okay? We only have to do the surface. And I'm going to vary where I feed the board into the machine. Now I'm going to make contact, and you can see the ammeters have a little bit of a jump. So I can take it down again to 630. Take that off the top. To the other end through. Now 620. Other end. Ten. That's it. Shut it off. Shut the air off. Okay? So the whole goal here with the drum sander is this. So let's say, for example, that I wanted my board to end up being 600 thousandths of an inch thick. In other words, 0.600. Okay? I would leave the planer with this board at about 650. And since I can make a pass at 10 thousandths each time, that means I have 5 passes I can make on the face of this before I reach 0.600. Okay, that's about the most I want to have to do here. Okay, that makes plenty. That leaves you plenty of material to remove in 50 thousandths of an inch to get this surface smooth, to get rid of any planer marks or anything like that. Okay, and you're not standing here all day using the drum sander. You should be able to get 5 passes done in a few minutes. Okay, so we're not going to sit here and take a ½ an inch of material off on the drum sander. We're going to take the majority of material off on the planer. Then we're going to finish off taking the last 50 thousandths, 5 or 6 passes on this machine. This will get rid of any planer marks, get a nice 180 grit sanded surface on it. Okay, so that is a really quick primer on the drum sander and the planer. Okay, so if there's any questions about those, go ahead and ask. We're going to take a minute here and we're going to boogie over to the toe. We're going to boogie over the toe. We're going to boogie over the table saw. Okay, so let me see if I can move this thing without creating too much trouble. Okay, all right. Means I got to get the cord over the cart. Nobody even said anything about having a mobile camera now, man. I got this thing all set up mobile now. I can wander around the shop with it. That's pretty slick if you ask me, man. Not too many people would have thought how to do that. So don't get caught on anything. Okay, it's just like you were in the shop walking through it. See? How nice is that? And I can take it all the way over to the other side of the shop because the planer's at the far east side of the shop, table saws at the far west side of the shop. All right, so here is our table saw. All right, get this over a little more. Now, there's quite a few of you that just came out of the beginning. So the difficulty we have here is that, and I might lose sound here for a second. I'm going to grab the stool. The difficulty we have is that you've never set foot in the shop. You've never used these machines. And contrary to what some of you might think, I know there's probably some of you that have parents, relatives, stuff like that may have a shop and you spend some time around it. And no offense intended, but I don't care. Okay? This is my shop and you will do things the way I want you to do them in here. So it gets a little bit crazy, but a lot of the machines that we have in here, I can just about guarantee that you don't have any relatives that have these, like that particular planer or that drum sander, or the digital drill press that we have, or 2 different table saws set up, one for ripping, one for dados and rabbits, okay? So there's a pretty good variation. So here's our table saw. Let's see if I can turn this the right way. Hey, I did it the right way. Okay, this is a 5 1/4 horsepower, 5 1/4 or 5 1/2, I can't remember. 5 1/2 horsepower cabinet saw. It's made by SawStop. And we'll talk about what that means at some point in time. It's not really important right now. But the main purpose of this machine is to rip lumber to final accurate width. And what I mean by that, we're going to go through these terms again. Okay. So this is considered a rip cut, altering the overall width of a board. In other words, taking material off the edge, okay? This is considered a cross cut, altering the overall length of a board or cutting across its width, okay? So the main purpose of this machine, as far as you guys are concerned, is to rip lumber to final accurate width, okay? A couple things that have to happen on the table saw. Number one, you have to put the long, flat, straight, square, jointed edge of the board. This is an edge, remember, against the fence. Never, ever, ever put the short end against the fence. This is a cross cut. We don't do cross cuts like that here. We do most of our cross cuts on the miter saw, okay? This is a rip cut. This is what it's intended to do, okay? This machine does have some limitations. For example, your board needs to be at least 12 inches long, right here where my thumb is, okay? Anything less than 12 inches long, you cannot rip it to width on the table saw. You cannot come up to this machine with it. If the fence, okay, this is the fence right here, this is the rip fence. That's why we say it's a ripping operation, okay? It's movable. Unlock it, slide it closer to or further away from the blade. There's a little tape measure embedded in the rail right here and a little sight glass with a red line in it. When you place that sight glass and that red line is directly over the 3-inch mark and you lock it down, now the distance between the fence and the right side of the blade is 3 inches, okay? So this is what your boards come out of from here to here. So this is really accurate, all right? Okay, another thing we can't do. If your fence is set at 4 inches, which is right there, or closer to the blade, you have to use a push stick. You cannot get your hand through there safely at 4 inches or closer to the blade. That does not mean that at 4 1/2 or 5 inches, you cannot use a push stick. You can certainly use a push stick at that width if you want to. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but you can. And it's not a bad thing if it's your first time using the saw and you're a little nervous about it, okay? This red doohickey here is called a throat plate. It actually covers the throat of the machine. It's a 10-inch blade, 10-inch diameter blade, carbide tipped blade. Right behind it is what's called the riving knife, okay? That is a safety feature on this machine that you are not allowed to operate without that in place. This can keep you from, this can prevent or help to prevent kickback. In other words, kickback is when a board gets shot from between the blade and the fence out the back of the machine. Okay, this helps to prevent that. In beginning woods, you're required to use not that guard, but this guard. This is an overhead guard that covers the blade. This portion covers the blade. It's got the same riving knife. If you look at this, it's the same thing, just bigger. It also has some spring-loaded anti-kickback pawls that if the board does start to kick back, these should grab it. The board will be trying to go in that direction. These little teeth will grab it and stop it from kicking back. I don't think they work very well, to be honest with you, but they're there. But in intermediate and advanced, you're allowed to use this machine solely with the riving knife in place. It drops right in, locks in place. There's a door down here we close for dust collection. And the throat plate goes back in. You get it in place a little bit this way and then push it in and it drops in and locks in place. Now it can't raise up. It slips on a couple little screws right there, okay? Our blade height on this machine needs to be, let me bring this over here, see what you can see. Okay, and I'm gonna zoom in on that a little bit, if I can. Okay, and I wanna go that way. Hey, I did it the right way again. Your blade height needs to be approximately 1/4 of an inch above your material. Basically, the way we do it, see these dips in between the teeth, these little valleys in between the teeth, those are called gullets, okay? So what we usually do is we will raise the blade to where you're about the bottom of the gullet. That's pretty good, okay? There's a very particular way in which you're supposed to move a board into this machine, all right? So I'm gonna show you a couple things. All right, so once we have our fence set, we're ready to go, okay? And I wanna make sure you can see what I want you to see. I'm gonna go back here a little bit. I wanna be this way, okay? So, where you stand is important. When I stand at the table saw, I want to stand to the left side of the blade, on this side of the blade, not here. If I stand here and that board kicks back, good luck to you. If I stand here and a board kicks back, it's gonna go right off to your right side. If something comes off the blade to the left side, the only thing it's gonna do is slowly slide off here and drop at your feet. It doesn't come off the left side of the blade with any force. It can come off the right side of the blade with a lot of force, 60, 70 miles an hour. Okay, and something like this, nice solid piece of oak coming at your crotch at 70 miles an hour, probably not going to end well. Okay, so where's my board? The reason this little guy, this riving knife, can help prevent kickback is this. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you. I'm not going to make it kick back. That'd be foolish. Okay, let me see if you can see that. All right, I'm going to bring it in a little bit so you can see it. Come around here. Come on, Mr. Cord. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so with the riving knife off, I'll show you guys something. At the front of the blade, right here, the blade is moving down into the throat plate, down into the machine. At the rear of the blade, it's moving up out of the machine. And here's how a kickback happens. When you're feeding a board into the machine, okay, and if it starts to come away from the fence right here, let me see if you guys can see that on the screen. Yeah, you can see it. And it starts to come away from the fence. This corner of the board can get caught by those teeth coming up out of the back of the blade. And when that gets caught, it's going to lift that board up. It's going to pick it up. It's going to fling it out the bat. Okay. So this riving knife is intended to help to prevent that possibility. We drop the riving knife in. Now what that riving knife is going to do is if you start to come away from the fence, okay, it's going to keep that from catching the back of your board. It's in the way. Your board can't come across the blade like this. It's going to hit the riving knife first, okay? The secondary use of this riving knife, and this happens a lot on pine, which is what this is. You guys see this gap? I'd already run this board through the blade this morning, okay? And that's the cut it made. That's known as the kerf, the blade kerf, okay? It's an 1/8 of an inch wide. How do I know it's an 1/8 of an inch wide? Because our blade is an 1/8 of an inch thick. So this machine with this blade creates an 1/8 of an inch wide blade kerf. Now the problem with that is this, okay? Pine's notorious for doing this. When you cut a board, okay, when you make a rip cut or a cross cut or anything like that, but it's more intense than a rip cut. You're releasing or easing internal stresses in the board. Now, depending on how bound up that board is, will determine how much this board's going to move as soon as you cut it. Sometimes they won't move at all, but pine's notorious for just tweaking out when you cut it. All these internal stresses, the board's just going, oh, thank goodness, man, I can relax. And it will sometimes spread and open up that kerf. Sometimes it will close that kerf. And if it closes that kerf, it'll start to pinch on this riving knife. And it'll actually stop you from being able to push it through, okay? So that's another thing this riving knife does. If that riving knife wasn't there, instead of pinching on the riving knife, it's gonna pinch on the blade. And if it pinches on the blade back here, it's gonna pick that board up and fling it up. And if you're standing right here, right in the face, okay? So that's another function of that riving knife, is to keep this kerf from closing up as it's being cut and pinching the back of this blade where it's coming up out of the machine, okay? So that's the basic safety measures on the machine itself. We're gonna run out of time before I can go too much further, so I don't want to. Tomorrow, in Big Blue Button, we're gonna go over the operation of the machine, how to properly and safely feed a board into it, and blah, 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 and all these other things, some of the accessories that go along with the table saw and some of the things that it can do. Wednesday, we will review the table saw and take a little 5-question quiz on it, okay? Oh, I got messages. Hold on, I didn't even see them. Let me see. What do you do if the board is under 12 inches? Well, we have procedures in place that should keep that from happening, okay? There's a certain way we go through the shop and the way we rough cut our lumber that we generally do not have boards less than 12 inches long that need to be cut. In other words, that's one of the reasons we cut to length last, okay? We do thickness first, then we do width at the table saw, then we do length at the miter saw. So if we need a bunch of 4-inch long boards, we're gonna get them to the proper width first, and then we're gonna worry about length, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And we'll talk about that some more. We're gonna go seriously over order of operations and how to get a board ready for use in a piece of furniture, okay? So I want you guys to remember tomorrow, please try to remember that we are using conferences and Big Blue Button for class, not Zoom, okay? Try to remember that, all right? And we will get ready to tear it up. We only got a couple days this week, which is kind of nice. You get to eat a lot of food on Thursday, hopefully. All right, so that's going to be it for today. Do me a favor and please enter your name in the chat window. You guys take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, okay? Bye, folks.